There's a quiet lie sitting at the center of retirement tax planning. It doesn't scream. It doesn't look dangerous. It usually sounds responsible, even helpful. Before we continue, if you haven't hit that subscribe button yet, this would be a really good time to do it. I've got a lot more of these waiting for you. The real question isn't what tax bracket you're in. It's whether your income can support your life without taxes quietly chipping away at your peace. Think about a car lot for a second. You walk in, and the sticker price is right there in giant letters. Bold, official, intimidating. It makes you feel something before you even touch the door handle. But if you've ever bought a car, you already know the truth. The sticker is not the whole story. There are discounts, trade-ins, timing, features you may not even need, and a final number that usually looks very different from that big number on the glass. Retirement tax headlines work the same way. You hear the IRS released new 2026 tax brackets, and your brain jumps straight to danger. Am I about to pay more? Am I in the wrong bracket? Am I behind again? And that is where the quiet lie begins. Because a tax bracket is not a bill. It is not a verdict. It is not a label on your forehead. It is just a layer. The IRS itself says taxes work in layers. As income rises, only the next layer gets taxed at the next rate. Not all of it, just the part in that layer. Let that sink in. A lot of retirees and seniors carry around a quiet fear that one wrong move will push all their money into some punishing bracket. That is not how it works. Think of it like climbing a staircase with a grocery bag in your hand. You do not teleport from the bottom step to the top. You take one step, then another. The next step only affects the next part of the climb. That is how the 2026 brackets work. For single filers, the 10% bracket covers taxable income up to $12,400. Then 12% starts above that. Then 22% starts above $50,400. Then 24% above $105,700. For married couples filing jointly, those lines are $24,800, $100,800, and $211,400. The top rate stays 37%, but only on the portion above $640,600 for single filers and $768,700 for married couples filing jointly. Now listen, most retirees are never dealing with that top layer, but the headline still creates the silent pressure, because headlines are built to make you feel movement before you understand meaning. And here is where it gets real. Most people walk into retirement focused on account balances. They look at their 401k, their IRA, their savings, and they ask, is this enough? And if the number doesn't feel big enough, they feel behind, even if they have something incredibly valuable sitting right in front of them. The goal of retirement is not wealth, it's income. I want you to imagine your retirement in two parts. Not one big number, two distinct piles. Pile one is income that shows up no matter what. Social Security, pensions, maybe rental income, money that keeps arriving whether the market is smiling or throwing a tantrum. Pile two is your savings, your investments, your accounts. Now here is the critical mistake most people make. They obsess over pile two while barely acknowledging pile one. And yet pile one is often doing far more heavy lifting than people realize. Your tax picture in retirement comes from the relationship between those two piles. Not just the size of your savings, not just the bracket chart, the relationship. Think of it this way. Your income floor is like the foundation of your house. Strong, underground, invisible, but holding everything up. Your savings are more like the furniture. Nice to have. Comfortable. Important? Yes. But still sitting on top of something else. Most people spend years staring at the furniture while ignoring whether the foundation is solid. Here's the thing. Most people are being told they are behind when they're not. Let's meet two people. The first one is Frank. Frank is 67. He spent over 3 decades working a steady, dependable job. Nothing flashy. No huge windfalls. Just consistency. If you saw him walking down the street, you would not assume financial success. Frank lives in a modest home. He drives an older car. And if you looked only at his savings, you might panic for him because Frank has around $140,000 saved. By the standards you have been taught, Frank looks behind. But here is what you do not see when you only look at that number. Frank has a monthly pension. Frank has Social Security income. Frank's home is fully paid off. Every single month, before he even thinks about his savings, money shows up. predictably, quietly, reliably. Frank is not struggling. Frank is not staring at the ceiling at 2 in the morning. Frank is living a life that works. Now let's meet Gary. Gary did everything right, at least according to the rules he was given. He saved aggressively. He invested diligently. He followed the benchmarks. And today, Gary has $800,000 saved. On paper, Gary is a success story. But Gary doesn't feel like one. Gary still has a mortgage. Gary doesn't have a pension. Gary relies heavily on his investment account to fund his life. Every market dip feels personal. Every withdrawal feels like a decision with emotional weight. And because so much of his retirement depends on what he pulls from that account, taxes matter to him in a different way too. Gary has more money than Frank, but less peace. It's not about who has more saved. It's about who has more certainty. What do you think? Are most people actually behind on retirement, or are they just measuring it wrong? Now let's connect that to the 2026 tax brackets, because this is where retirees can make a quiet mistake that silently erodes confidence. If you think retirement taxes are only about the bracket chart, you will miss the much bigger picture. The bigger picture is taxable income, not total resources, not your net worth, taxable income. That is what determines how much of your retirement life ends up exposed. Think of the standard deduction like a shield you hold in front of your income. Before the tax system really starts touching your money, that shield blocks part of it. In 2026, that shield gets a little bigger. The standard deduction rises to $16,100 for single filers and married filing separately, $32,200 for married couples filing jointly, and $24,150 for heads of household. That matters, because it means more income can slip underneath the tax radar before the brackets even begin to matter. And for older adults, there is another layer. Think of it like putting a thicker coat over that shield in cold weather. Starting with tax years 2025 through 2028, eligible taxpayers age 65 or older may claim an additional $6,000 deduction per person. If both spouses qualify on a joint return, that can be $12,000. It can be used whether you take the standard deduction or itemize. But it phases out once modified adjusted gross income goes above $75,000 for single filers or $150,000 for joint filers. That is not a tiny footnote. That is a meaningful planning tool for a lot of seniors. And yet most people will never feel that when they hear the headline. They will just hear new tax brackets and assume the government quietly moved the goalposts again. Sometimes it did, but sometimes it also handed you a little more room than you thought you had. Here is where the faucet analogy matters. Think of your Social Security benefit like a faucet. Behind that faucet is a pipe, one you have been filling your entire working life. Every paycheck, every tax contribution, it all builds pressure in that pipe. The longer you wait to turn the faucet on, the stronger the pressure becomes. Turn it on at 62, the flow is lighter. Wait longer, the flow rises. For someone whose full retirement age is 67, the Social Security Administration shows a simple example. A $1,000 benefit at full retirement age would be reduced to about $700 if claimed at 62. Wait until 70, and that same base benefit rises to 124%, or about $1,240. That is real. That is meaningful. But here is the part most people don't think about. That faucet belongs to you. You paid into it. And if you wait too long to turn it on, some of that water may never reach you. It stays in the pipe, unused, gone. So the question isn't what's the best age. It's what's the best decision for your life right now. If your health is shaky, if longevity in your family is uncertain, if work has become exhausting, if you need the income floor earlier, then taking benefits at 62 may be completely rational. If you have other resources, good health, and a spouse who may rely on the higher survivor benefit later, waiting can be incredibly valuable. Numbers matter, but how you feel about those numbers, that matters just as much. Quick check. Do you know your full retirement age for Social Security? Most people don't. And while we are here, let me give you one of the most important retirement tax reminders nobody talks about enough. Delaying Social Security is not the same thing as delaying Medicare. The SSA reminds people that if you wait past 65 to start Social Security, you still need to sign up for Medicare at 65, or your Part B and Part D may cost more later. That is one of those quiet little rules that creeps in, nudges people toward a mistake, and then hands them a penalty they never saw coming. Now let's talk about taxable Social Security, because this is where a lot of retirees get blindsided. Think of your Social Security like sunlight coming through a window. It feels clean, it feels untouchable, but depending on what else is in the room, that light can hit more surfaces than you expected. The IRS says your benefits may become taxable if 1/2 of your benefits plus your other income, including tax-exempt interest, rises above the base amount for your filing status. For single filers, head of household, and qualifying surviving spouses, that base amount is $25,000. For married couples filing jointly, it is $32,000. And if you are married filing separately and lived with your spouse at any time during the year, that base amount is $0. Let that sink in for a second. This is why retirees can feel confused. You may think, my Social Security is my foundation, so surely it is all protected. Not necessarily. Pull too much from an IRA. Convert too much to Roth in 1 year. Sell appreciated assets at the wrong time. Add pension income on top. Suddenly part of what felt safe becomes taxable. That does not mean you did something wrong. It means the system has layers, and those layers interact. And this is exactly why so many people misuse calculators. Not because calculators are bad, but because people treat an estimate like a verdict. A calculator can show you one angle. It cannot feel your life. It cannot see your spouse's needs. It cannot tell whether the piece of a guaranteed check matters more to you than squeezing every last dollar from a model. You don't need perfection to have a successful retirement. You need clarity. Let me ask you, have you ever calculated what your pension is actually worth in real dollars? Most people never do. Think of a pension like an invisible asset sitting in your garage under a blanket. It does not sparkle the way a brokerage statement does. You cannot watch it bounce around on an app. But that does not make it small. In fact, for many retirees, it is one of the strongest financial foundations available today. A monthly pension that covers a chunk of your bills month after month is doing something many large investment accounts cannot do on their own. It is creating certainty. And certainty matters because inflation is the silent eroder. It does not knock on your front door. It just quietly raises the cost of groceries, quietly raises the cost of insurance, quietly raises the cost of repairs. And then one day you look around and realize the same life costs more than it used to. Social Security has a cost of living adjustment, and for 2026, that COLA is 2.8%. That helps. It exists to protect purchasing power, but let's be honest about it. A COLA is like bringing an umbrella into a storm. It matters. You want it. But sometimes the rain still finds your shoes. It is not pessimism, it's realism. And in this case, realism isn't negative. It's empowering. Because once you stop pretending the system will solve every problem for you, you start planning with open eyes. And open eyes lead to better decisions. Here's a question for the married folks. Have you and your spouse ever actually talked about what happens if one of you is gone? This one matters more than people realize. Think of retirement planning for a couple like building a bridge with 2 support beams. While both beams are standing, things feel stable. But if one beam disappears, the whole structure changes. The Social Security Administration says surviving spouses can start at 71.5% of the deceased spouse's benefit, and that amount rises the longer they wait, up to 100% at full retirement age for survivor benefits. In plain English, one spouse's claiming decision can shape the other spouse's future security in a very real way. This is not just about maximizing a monthly check while both of you are here. It is also about protecting the survivor. That is why sometimes waiting to claim is not only about you, it may be about the person who lives after you. And that changes the math a lot. Now let's come back to Gary for a minute, because Gary's problem is not just that he has to withdraw from savings. Gary also faces sequence of returns risk. That phrase sounds technical, but the idea is simple. Think of planting a garden right before a windstorm. If the storm hits when the roots are still shallow, the damage is worse. In retirement, if the market drops early while you are taking withdrawals at the same time, your portfolio can get hit in a way that is hard to recover from. The order matters. The timing matters. The market does not have to be bad forever to do damage. It just has to be bad at the wrong time. That is why guaranteed income matters so much. It lowers the pressure on your investments. It gives you more breathing room. It reduces the chance that you will be forced to sell assets when they are down just to pay the electric bill. It is not about who has more saved. It's about who has more certainty. And the tax side of this matters too. If all of your retirement lifestyle has to come from withdrawals, then each year becomes a little balancing act. How much can I pull? How much becomes taxable? Am I jumping brackets? Am I making more of my Social Security taxable? Am I pushing up Medicare costs later? Gary may have the bigger account, but he is also carrying more moving parts. Frank, on the other hand, has something people with millions are often searching for: stable monthly income, predictability, a floor. You may already have what people with millions are searching for. You are not behind. In fact, you may already be standing on one of the strongest financial foundations available today. I want to know, have you ever felt like you were doing everything right, but still felt behind? You are not alone. And part of that feeling comes from the sticker price illusion. Remember that car lot. Remember that giant number in the windshield. Retirement planning has its own sticker price. Sometimes it is the famous $1 million target. Sometimes it is some giant nest egg benchmark that gets repeated so often it starts to sound holy. But that number is often just an anchor. It makes you feel like anything below it means failure. The truth is far more personal than that. If your income floor is strong, if your housing costs are manageable, if your taxes are planned well, if your spending is honest, you may not need anything close to the number that scared you. On the other hand, if your expenses are high, your debt is still hanging around, and your income floor is weak, even a big account can feel fragile. Stop measuring yourself against everyone else. Stop feeling behind and start focusing on what truly gives you freedom. Now let's talk about expenses, because this is where a quiet fear often becomes a real problem. Think of your spending like packing for a trip. Most people pack for the version of the trip they hope to take, not the version they actually take. They remember the sunny days and forget the extra shoes, the snacks, the airport parking, the surprise delays. Retirees do this with spending all the time. They estimate a neat little number in their head. Then life shows up. Home repairs, dental work, insurance increases, helping a child, replacing a car. Most people underestimate by a lot, not because they are careless, but because life is lumpy. And when you underestimate expenses, taxes can feel bigger than they really are because there is less margin. That is why building a buffer matters. Not a fantasy. Not some heroic projection, a buffer, enough plus breathing room. Here's a question. If you had to choose between more money or more certainty, which would it be? Keep that in your head as we go. Here is what I want you to do. Start by figuring out your income floor, not what you hope it will be, not what a calculator guessed 5 years ago. What money is actually coming in every month no matter what? Social Security, pensions, annuities if you have them, rental income if it is stable enough to count. Get that number on paper. That number matters more than you have been told. Then look at your real spending, not the version you imagine, the version your bank statements would recognize. Go back over the last year and look at housing, food, utilities, insurance, healthcare, travel, gifts, repairs, and the little things that invisibly, steadily add up. Retirement is not about replacing your paycheck. It is about supporting your actual life. After that, find the gap. If your income floor covers most of your life, great. Then your savings do not need to carry the whole house. They just need to handle the space between what comes in and what goes out. That gap is what your withdrawals need to cover. That gap is what your tax planning needs to focus on, not some giant benchmark somebody threw on a screen. Then look at timing. If you have room to choose when to claim Social Security, do not ask only, how do I maximize the check? Also ask, what does this do to my spouse? What does it do to my tax picture? What does it do to my need for withdrawals in the early years? What does it do to my peace of mind? The question isn't, what's the best age? It's what's the best decision for your life right now. And finally, build margin. Give yourself a cushion against inflation, because inflation quietly erodes plans that look perfect on paper. Give yourself a cushion against taxes, because taxes do not just show up in one place. They ripple through Social Security, withdrawals, brackets, and sometimes Medicare. Give yourself a cushion against life, because life never stays still long enough for a fragile plan to feel good. Here's something to think about. If you found out today that you're actually on track, how would that change your week? Because that is really what I want for you here. Not false comfort, not empty hype, not another giant number thrown at your face. Clarity, the kind that lets your shoulders drop a little. The kind that helps you stop treating every headline like a threat. The kind that reminds you that retirement is not a test you pass by hitting a magic number. It is a phase of life you shape with income, spending, timing, and choices. If the system only rewards you with almost enough, you will spend your entire life chasing more. But if you understand your numbers, if you build your income, if you define your life on your terms, you do not chase anymore. You decide. And that is the shift from fear to clarity, from chasing to choosing, from not enough to enough. You do not need perfection to have a successful retirement. You do not need to get everything exactly right. What you need is awareness, clarity, and the willingness to face the real numbers so you can make real decisions. Because when you understand your income, when you understand your expenses, when you understand how your plan holds up over time, something changes. You feel more in control, more confident, more at ease, and that is what retirement should feel like. If this video made you think differently about your retirement, subscribe. The next one goes even deeper.